the premiere of the third one, was it the third one or was it four? I can't remember. Anyway, I flew out to Hollywood and sat like 2 rows behind Len Wein and threw things at him. Just to make sure he didn't get, let it all go to his head. Then Hugh Jackman got up and introduced Len. And I thought, oh, you creep. He introduces you, he never introduced me. Aww. On the other hand, there was Ian McKellen.
That's awesome.
About which I will say no more, but it was cool. Dear boy. Yeah.
With the story arcs of original Excalibur and original New Mutants, did you have any influence from like a soap opera? Because sometimes it seems like the characters would have a lot more in-depth than other story arcs such as Uncanny.
What? Right. Soap opera? Deep emotional overplaying of themes between characters who are more obsessed with like trying to find a comfy bed than saving the world? A hallmark of my work for 40 years? Can't imagine where you thought that. No, I mean the thing with Excalibur, especially, what was the other one?
New Mutants, the original series.
Oh, New Mutants, the original series. I mean, the realistic problem with New Mutants, the original series, was, dude, they're all under 15, and some of them are barely adolescents. There is a slight conceptual problem with having them fight Magneto, namely child endangerment. It's even in, and we're going back to the dawn of time, even in the early 1980s, it was considered bad form to send little kids out against supervillains. If they trip over them in the wall by accident and have to deal with a situation, that's cool. But to have kids actually go out and fight wasn't the style. So we had to be artful in our getting... Okay, maybe it wasn't artful. In getting past that circumstance. As they got a little older and Wheezy and I got replaced, it got a lot more silly. But as far as Excalibur went, Alan and I, from the very beginning, never thought of it as a superhero book. We thought of it as essentially a cross between AbFab and I mean, come on. Patsy and Adina, they would fit into Excalibur right there. Kitty, Rachel, Patsy, Adina. I'm there. With Captain Britain as what's her face? The daughter. What? Sappy. Yes, that works perfectly. Responsible with a frown. But we thought of it as basically 5 totally mismatched weirdos living together and occasionally saving the world, if not the outright universe. And that was what differentiated it from X-Men, which was, weirdos saving the universe and occasionally living together. You play with the trope and see what... The whole point actually was you take as many disparate, interesting, weird-ass souls as you can, put them in a box, stir them around, and let things happen. We never thought of it as, today we must go up against blah, or blah blah. I mean, what would happen is I'd sit down with Wheezy and say, I have no ideas, I don't know what to do, I'm a failure, I should quit. Lucy would go, but what about so-and-so? Weren't you going to do this? Oh, yeah. Did you ever answer this question? No. We look at them as people trying to live their lives. It's like Scott wants to go out on a date with someone, but he doesn't know how to ask. Kitty doesn't want to hang out with the kids. She's an X-Men. She wants to be with the X-Men. Nothing to do with superheroes. It has everything to do with how you live your life. Because I figured the readers know nothing about superheroes and saving the world, but if I can grab a moment where you look at the way Kitty deals with a circumstance or Kurt deals with a circumstance and say, oh yeah, I know that guy. The fact that he's blue and furry and has a tail is just icing on the cake. And you think, wow, he's like me. I wish I was like him, because I'd really be cool with a tail. And that takes you to the point where the silly stuff, i.e. the Brood, the Shi'ar, Captain Walnut, whatever, you accept it as part of the reality because that's the fun. But the stuff that bonds you are the human moments that put it in context. Yeah.
Your stories have often been read as an allegory for civil rights struggles, gay rights struggles, and so forth. Living in the real world, being a different person, being different from the norm. Was that an intentional aspect? The outsiders?
Well, the question was, a lot of people. There's been a lot of articles and talk, and of my X-Men's rep as an analogy for a lot of struggles that outsiders feel in the real world, trying to fit in. And in a way, it comes out of my own experience. I mean, I'm off the boat. I'm an immigrant. Had you known me years ago, you would have heard the ghostly remains of an English accent. I've been bluffing long enough, I can't get back to it now. And trust me, when you're 8 years old and you come out of a British environment and you walk into public school first in Tampa and then in Denver, not to cast aspersions about Denver, but they don't respond well to kids who wear shorts and knee socks and a tie, especially in grade school. We won't go into the sleeveless sweater and the blazer. I mean, this is very proper British public school attire. Doesn't fly well in the shadow of the Rockies, let me tell you. And oddly enough, kids in the 50s had a unique way of expressing themselves. It was nonverbal and usually involved the right fist, which even in elementary school had an impact. So you adapt. And that was nowhere near what might happen if you were Hispanic or black or Asian or Mormon or gay or anything else. Though that wasn't a factor when you were as much when you were in elementary school. So fitting in to me was part of my growing up, and it was a matter of applying the same rules and the same realities to the fictional characters. I mean, and trust me, if you want to feel like a total outsider, my parents were leftist limeys. And socialism in England after the war was a totally different thing. I mean, if you think the Republicans are pissed off at the Democrats now, if they'd run into 1950s English socialists, they would go ballistic, their heads would explode, they would just start shooting. We were only like one small step removed from the C word from Moscow. And where we lived on Long Island, these were people who thought Barry Goldwater was a dangerous leftist. And that's when he was running for president, for God's sake. So you learn to adapt, and very much to keep your mouth shut. So again, this all feeds into the mix, and it all fed in onto the page. And it was getting it out there and saying, if I can get the readers to understand what it's like being on the outside looking in, maybe that will help them empathize and evolve to a more generous approach to the world around them and the people around them. And a lot of times it worked, thank goodness. Yeah?
What made the X-Men say, I mean, before you, they got supported on reproducing the issues and up, and you came along and it just took off on the end and everything else.
The question was, what made the X-Men?
What made it worth continuing? I mean,
What made it worth continuing? My first association with Marvel was actually in 1968. Big year. I went to work for them as a gopher. We called them gophers. They're interns now. They're officially hired slaves. In my day, we were gophers. We weren't official. We were slaves, and we weren't paid at all, which was kind of cool. And the second week I was there, the first issue of Roy Thomas and Neil Adams' run on X-Men came out in print, and the third issue came in to the office to be processed for publication. I took one look at it, and it was like, wait. Fill in the gap, blank yourself. This was the most beautiful work I'd ever seen. I mean, it was like, it's Neil Adams. He could draw. And Roy was not a half-bad, brilliant writer either. But at the same time, I'm dealing with fan mail. Yes, in those days, words were written on paper with pen. Occasionally they were typed. And you, try to understand this, put them in the mail. You call it snail mail, we called it the U.S. mail. And it came to the office, and you opened the envelopes and read them. Doesn't happen these days, unfortunately. And we got letters from kids, or fans. How dare you dismiss Werner Roth? Who is this person who draws big hair, ugly people? I'm going, dude, are you talking about, like, Beast? Because the only big hair I see is big on him is him. And if you're talking about Gene, you have no concept of the word ugly. But there were people who bonded with the old stuff and didn't bond with the new stuff, and you had to answer them politely. The problem was we didn't get the sales figures on those issues, because it was all newsstand, until 8 or 9 months after publication. So by the time, this is January, by the time around Thanksgiving, they actually got sales figures on Neil's early issues and realized they had a hit on their hand. The book had been canceled, Neil had gone back to DC, there was no way they could restart it. But there was no way of recreating the magic with anyone else. So the company figured, we'll just do reprints for a while, it won't cost us anything, we'll let it sit and try bringing the X-Men back occasionally in other books and see if we can jumpstart an alternative. And that went on for about 3 years. And then in 74 and 75, Roy Thomas and Stan and Roy and Len Wein got together and started putting together a new concept for the X-Men. And Marvel's idea was to internationalize the group because they wanted to try and see if they could sell it overseas. And even if they couldn't make money in the United States, maybe we could make money in, like, Europe. So, but they didn't want to invest that much money, so they did it as a giant-sized quarterly. And Dave would draw, Len would write, the world would be happy. By then I was working there as an assistant editor. My desk was right outside the editor-in-chief's office, which had a door. And being me, I kept listening to the plotting sessions where Len and Dave would just sit around for a couple of hours after work and structure out the book. This is the advantage of being in New York, having no girlfriend, living fairly uptown from the office and having no life. You hang around the office far longer than is healthy. And I'd chip in ideas. And Len foolishly would occasionally take one. And the first issue came out. He and Dave started working on the second. There were two decisions. One, the company decided that quarterlies wouldn't work and they go bi-monthly. And Len decided he'd had enough with being editor-in-chief and went freelance and took 4 monthly titles, the top 4 in the line. There is an advantage to being bossy. But the downside was he didn't have enough time in his schedule to do X-Men. So he asked me if I was interested in writing. Cool characters, new book, Dave Cockrum. Yeah, like no-brainer. I said, yes. Yes, I will run for president. No problem. And Dave and I sat down and we restructured the end of the second giant size, which became 95. And we were off and running. But the idea that it was a preordained success was totally... If anyone had known what was coming, Len wouldn't have quit that book if you'd thrown him out the window. He'd have crawled back in, crawled up the stairs, and just sat down at his desk and kept typing. It was an afterthought. It was an experiment. Roy's X-Men back in '69 had done well. It hadn't broken records, but it had definitely spiked. But they figured it was 5 years later. It wasn't going to lightning wasn't going to strike twice. What no one realized was that was the warning shot. This was the big one. But even then, we didn't know. We knew the first issue would do well, but there was no direct market. Again, we had to wait 6 months to get the information. By the time we knew we had a hit, roughly around 100, 101, this was great, but Dave couldn't draw any faster than he was drawing. We were stuck with a bi-monthly book. It wasn't until John came in and we could literally kick into overdrive that we just rolled. And paradoxically, it wasn't until 4 years later, after John had finished his run and Dave had come back for his second run, and we moved on to Paul Smith, that all the elements came together. The direct market, newsstand, Paul Smith, the right stories, the right place, the right time, and that was when we spiked from from a 250,000 to a 500,000 and never looked back. And that was, but it wasn't preordained. It was in retrospect, it seemed like a natural evolution. In reality, it was sort of like we were making it up as we went along.
Quick thing in between. Okay, we got 2 people that are going to get towed because they parked in front of the building next door, which is not ours. Okay, there's a Nissan Pathfinder over there and a silver Toyota Prius over there. If you're parked in front of the building next door, that's not our building. So I don't want to get anybody towed because, man, talk about bad form. That sucks. So, okay, thanks. Sorry, Chris.
You should have interrupted.
Oh, no.
Hey, from New York, dude, we understand towing. You don't screw around with the truck.
When you were writing Wolverine, was it hard to humanize the character where you wanted to take it?
When I was writing Wolverine #1, the Wolverine series, was it hard to humanize the character and take him where I wanted to go? Well, actually, that was the culmination of a really big ongoing fight. Not between comic book characters, but between creators. Because my attitude all along had always been, Wolverine should never have his own series. Wolverine is like a really, 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 kids, don't listen to this, good tequila. If you're from an older generation, substitute a non-drinking material. It is great in little bits. The minute you start guzzling them, you're in a made-for-TV movie that doesn't end well. And my point was that you should not make him, he should not become the hallmark of the industry. You need that air of mystery, that air of excitement, that air of danger, so that when you pick up the miniseries, the reader has no idea where we're going to go with it, what he's going to do, how it's going to interact. There is this tremendous ongoing bit of suspense, and you can keep the ongoing growth of the character focused in on X-Men. Oddly enough, that was overruled. And I remember a discussion I had at the time with a comic book retailer who subsequently went out of business, but that's a whole different story and should not be taken as gospel to this story. Where he was, all he was interested in was feeding his customers' desire. Essentially, he would stuff comic books down their throat like you would stuff foie gras down a goose. To get the most return on your investment as quickly and efficiently as possible. But at some point the goose explodes and you don't have a new one. At some point the reader will just get bored with 500 Deadpools a month and move on to something else. And I didn't want that to happen to Wolverine, because when you have a character that's that rich and that cool, you don't want to waste it. But Marvel wanted the returns on the investment. So my thought was to come up with a concept for Wolverine that was diametrically removed from X-Men. Because if you're reading about the adventures of Wolverine, if you do that in Wolverine, why read the X-Men? And if you're enjoying it in X-Men, why read Wolverine? Sooner or later, you burn out. Something's going to run into a wall, and it's not going to work. And quite frankly, the way Dave designed Logan's face, he was a lot more interesting without the mask than he was with the mask. And I like him better when he's not wearing skin tights. So I set up Wolverine to showcase his human side, not his superhero side. It evolved, but fundamentally it didn't work. Which goes to show that's why management feels they're smart and freelancers are idiots. That's, it was a nice try. I think Larry Hama, I think Joe Duffy and Archie Goodwin did wonderful things with their stories, and Larry Hama and Mark Silvestri did a brilliant run. But it evolved eventually away from anything approaching my concept, and basically just became the adventures of the guy in the suit, popping his claws and hacking the living shit out of everybody. You know, been there, done that. Not my style. Yeah.
Are there any characters that you haven't worked on before that you would like? Yeah, that you would really like to? And
not anymore. Are there any characters that I haven't worked on that I'd like to work on? Actually, let me reverse the question. Are there any characters that you guys would like to have seen me work on?
Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
I did him.
That sounds like a loaded question.
Thought I did. Oops. I grew up reading Stan and John Sr. It's like, why fight with... It's like, yes, can you rewrite the Sermon on the Mount? Oh, sure, why not? But, you know, I'm just... No. Got me there. Yeah. Never really rang my chimes. That was more that I enjoyed Doug Bunch's version of him more than I would mine. I mean, if he was guest starring in Team Up, yeah, maybe. I mean, but not that much. Yeah? Thanos. Or a dark side. Who needs Thanos? I'm not being facetious, actually. It's like, if you're dealing with a primal Kirby metaphor, why, you know, it's like you've conquered the universe once, you've conquered it how many times? But dark side, I mean, I'm sorry, dark side, still the best intro scene I've come up with. Who summons Dark Phoenix? I, Dark Side. I'm there. I'll take notes. I mean, it got Walt to stick his head in the door. It got that story written. That image right there. And it was one of the rare occasions where you start in the middle and expand outward in both directions. But that was one glorious middle to start with. Any other thoughts on who? Yeah?
This is a different question.
Oh, so one last shot. Anybody else have a character? Okay. As soon as somebody makes me an offer. No, I mean, it was originally supposed... Huntsman was a character of mine that I debuted in Wildcats and then in Mark's... whatever his thing was for Wildstorm, and it was supposed to be its own series, but the artist we had in mind decided he wanted to do his own series, and it just never came together. So it's been sitting basically in my files waiting for its opportunity, and if it ever arises, I'm there to do it. It's just it hasn't gelled yet. The fate of many a concept in comics, from every, you know. Mark Millar is just an incredibly lucky SOB. Son of a Britisher. Yeah, you thought of something else, didn't you? Yes.
Okay. As a new writer, especially when you're breaking into...
No, I've been around for a while.
No, I know.
Oh, you mean someone else?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
For a new writer, when they're breaking into the game, when they're trying to get in, get the name established and everything else.
You have my deepest sympathy.
Right. When the real world is all around them, jobs, because writing's not easy, bills and everything else, how do you motivate yourself to actually sit down and get it done?
Are you talking about writing in general or writing for comics?
Let's say in general.
Writing in... My apologies to everyone for the next 5 minutes. This is a craft. But it is also a fundamental obsession. It is not a question of I want to be a writer. It is a question of are you or are you not? And I do not use those phrases either euphemistically or casually. I spent 10 years introducing myself. What are you, Chris? Oh, I'm a political theorist. Yes, that's how I started. Well, I'm an actor who's also a political theorist. Well, I'm an actor who's also a political theorist, and I do a little writing on the side. Well, I'm an actor-writer. Well, I'm a writer-actor. Well, I'm a writer. No. What I was from day one was a writer. Why? Because political theory, acting, monologuing, the whole 9 yards were all avocations that I loved, but I could walk away from and did walk away from at any given moment. Writing was something that was always there. I have notebooks, well, actually Columbia University now has them. Yes, I've just donated all my papers, God help me, to Columbia. And it's stored in their rare books archives. There are Nobel Prize winners there. There are presidents there. Now, we're not talking 20th century presidents. We're talking presidents going back to, like, Jefferson. And not Davis. The other one. With the wives. This is like, holy. And that's just domestic. We haven't even gone overseas yet. So this is like serious company. The Dark Phoenix saga is stuck in there with them. I'm sorry, it's an ego boo. Forgive me. But the point was, from the very earliest days, I was always writing. I was being yelled at in high school, junior high school. 3rd grade. True story. I'm in class. I get detention. I'm stuck out in the hall. The teacher would stick your desk out in the hall and you have to sit there looking like an idiot all day because you've been a bad boy. Calls my home, summons my mother into the school. I want to show you what Chris has done. I gave him instructions and he did not obey them. She was German. For 40 years I thought of her as this ugly, twisted, horrible, perverted, old face. Turns out she was 28 and a fox. Just goes to show perception is everything. Calls my mother in and shows her. Our class instruction for the day were to label the parts of a chicken. There's a chicken, you label the parts. The beak, the wings, the feet, the tail, the egg, blah, blah, blah. So my mother looks at it and sees what I've done that is so evil. I had drawn a word balloon. I drew an oval with pointers, and inside it I wrote very neatly, cock-a-doodle-doo. It's a chicken. They do this. That violated the rules of engagement. My mother took one look at this and burst out laughing. She thought it was the most charming and, for an 8-year-old, original thing she had seen all week, or all day, or since leaving home. To her it was funny. It was a typically English irony with her typically English mom. So the teacher straightens up, frowns at her, and says, "Well, with a mother like you, it's no wonder Christopher's turning out the way he is." My mother's response was a monosyllabic Anglo-Saxonism that was not commonly used in public in those days. That was followed by, "You." The teacher did not take this well. So this explains the writing thing. The point is, there's never been a time when I'm not writing. There is never a time when I could imagine myself not writing, even whether I'm paid for it or not. But that's the starting point for what's driving you. If that's the box you find yourself in, then you have to then it's simply a matter of finding a way to express it. The point is, you should never restrict yourself. Do articles, do prose, do newspaper pieces, do magazine pieces, do blogcasts, anything to get your idea out there, and you keep throwing the darts at the wall until something sticks. And once you get that first stick, you then build onto the next one and the next and the next. Everyone here probably has a story to tell. The ultimate question is, how many people will start that story, finish that story, and then go on to the next story? And that's what differentiates the working professional from the talented amateur or the wannabe. And a lot of times it involves doing that while holding on to a steady day job that pays your mortgage, or your rent, or whatever, feeds you. But ideally, if all goes well, sooner or later you get to the point where the pendulum shifts and you earn more from writing than you do from everything else, and you can shift. Though there are a great many writers, professionals who've been working their whole careers who don't. They do two jobs. You just have to learn to cope and move ahead. And take each rejection as a learning curve to find a way to either overcome that obstacle or bypass it completely. You don't have to keep hitting your head against the same wall. If Marvel says no, you go on to DC. If DC says no, you go on to Dark Horse. If that says no, screw them, go on to Time. If Time says no, go on to American Spectator, or whatever. You find a venue. Do anything to get your foot in the door. You write anything to get your foot in the door. But once you get your foot in the door and it has been crushed, then you just keep playing at it until the pendulum swings in your favor.
Good answer.
Hopefully it works. Yeah. Well, actually, let me... no, you first.
With the original X-Men series, the original, what was your favorite character in the...
You mean the original Roy Thomas X-Men?
Yeah. Who's your favorite character versus personality?
The problem is it applies, the same problem applies to them as applies to me. I've written these guys now for 40 years. And that includes Scott, Bobby, Warren. Is the coolest character I know, and it would be equally valid. That's just the reality I've come to get used to. My question is, who's your favorite and why?
I like Bobby. He's one of my favorites. He's really young and quirky sometimes, but he also has I think a really cool power. I like his origin and how he was attacked, and wasn't he attacked by a group of people, and then I thought Scott saved him after he got attacked. Bobby, and then his
Oh, I'm sorry. When you say origin, they're mutants. I keep thinking, yeah, they were born. Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly it. If there's a character, the key with characters is there's no right or wrong answer. There's the answer that is yours and that is right for you, and that's absolutely 100% valid. And it might be the same character as the guy next to you, but for totally different reasons. Totally cool. Because each reason you toss in my direction goes into the mix, and I think, if I were still writing the book, that's a cool idea. He likes the X-Men for this reason. He likes Bobby for this reason. I can play with that. How can I play with it? And the next thing you know, there's a story. But that's how it works.
you steal from everyone. And then you mix it together your way, and you come up with a story, hopefully, that really works and really resonates positively with the larger audience, in addition to the one person who looks at it and goes, wow, that's really cool. That reminds me of what I love most about the character.
Well,
Yes.
folks, that's it. I'm sorry. Chris's, unfortunately, United Airlines changed their flight schedule, so Chris's flight is at 4:10. So we've got 2 hours here, and we've got 70 numbers that are out there. We're going to be signing now 11 through 20, but I want everybody to thank Chris for coming out here on Saturday.
Woo!
Next time I'll talk faster.